We welcome in Bryan Munson of Husker Online here to the program. Bryan, how are you this fine Monday afternoon, good sir?
I am doing fine. A little bit of a shortened week to get all of our ducks in a row for the game on Friday, huh?
Indeed. Nebraska worked out pretty well for them last year going on the road. They hit Illinois at home this week. And Bryan, we'll get into what a short week means in recruiting for Nebraska here in a little bit. But before we get to that, for the first time since 2016, Nebraska's 3-0 after the non-conference. It might seem pretty trivial, but it's happened less than half the time in the 2000s. How important is it for Nebraska to put a 3-0 start on the table for some recruits that Nebraska has on its board?
Well, I think it's very important. Nebraska's crossing over in some areas that, like what you'd mentioned, they haven't found themselves here in this unfamiliar territory, basically, many times in the 2000s. And Nebraska has been almost kind of an afterthought nationally, where you're getting some national pub, you're getting picked up by the larger news stations, and some of the national guys are talking about you. They're talking about your head coach, or talking about your starting true freshman. There's some reason to believe that Nebraska is becoming cool again. And that is huge when it comes to recruiting. So you want the momentum to continue. You want to continue writing this thing out right now. I mean, this is exactly where Matt Rule and his staff wanted to be. They wanted to be 3-0 heading into Big Ten play. And they wanted to kind of have this class where it's, 95+% ish, kind of complete with the 2025 group. And, maybe a couple of spots here that could be cherries on top of the sundae, and then really focusing on the 2026 and the 2027s. But the key part, which you mentioned, is having the wins in the win column, having a great environment, for all the recruits to see when they come to Lincoln for a game, and they can kind of put all this stuff together to where they can start arranging more trips to come back to Nebraska, whether it's this fall, this winter, this spring, or potentially this summer, next summer with official visits. So this is critical. This is a critical thing. It's just another step in the process in how you kind of get this thing to come together to where you can really start focusing on the 2026s.
Bryan, what are you hearing now compared to maybe a few years ago from recruits or their parents that tells you Nebraska might be on the road to being cool again?
Yeah. Michael Terry had some interesting words for me 2 weeks ago where he can see it, he can, everybody's been asked to kind of close your eyes and envision this, and think about what Matt Rule has done at those previous stops, whether it was at Temple or Baylor, and then kind of just considering, what the possibilities could be at Nebraska with all the things and the spoils and the facilities and whatever else you want to kind of add to that. So I'm listening to the words. They're telling me that it's louder this year than what it was last year. They're telling me that they all think that Nebraska's on their way back. They're saying that obviously, they believe that they got a leader in Dylan Raiola. A lot of positive news, coming out of these weekends, to where it kind of all adds up to Nebraska is cool. They've got the national stuff kind of going on now, and all the news and being mentioned by certain broadcasters. And I think that that's exactly what, Matt Rule wants. I think he's downplaying it just perfectly as well, because he's trying to keep a team focused. He's the part that's he has to do that. And I totally understand the difference between the two. I think, though, you really want all these other people to keep driving up, the speculation, this positive kind of speculation about buying stock in Nebraska and that defense and the true freshman quarterback. Those are all fantastic things that are keeping Nebraska out there in front of the recruits and keeping them thinking about the Huskers.
Bryan, obviously year to year, it's going to change. Injuries will pop up. Attrition is just natural. But I know in our conversations, a big selling point that recruits have seen in Nebraska's favor is, hey, there's a path for me to get on the field early. We see that with a Raiola, with a Ja'Cory Barney, a Carter Nelson. Both guys just had their first touchdowns. But then we hear from Matt Rule today, and Riley Van Poppel's headed for a red shirt. And Matt Rule says, you can play 8 or 10 plays a game this year, or you can be Ty Robinson next year. How close is Nebraska as a program, again, with barring incident, to being a program where early playing time is the rarity and not necessarily a selling point for recruits?
Well, I think Riley Van Poppel came along at an interesting time. I think it's different, and he's got an opportunity here. I mean, I think it was all hands on deck last year, and that's what really kind of brought him in and said, hey, we're going to push you through and do this stuff. But now you've got an ability to kind of step back and look and maybe see and what you've learned, what makes sense for you, for the players on your roster, what makes sense for your team next year. And I think when it comes to Riley Van Poppel, I think that this is kind of a no-brainer. I think everybody's seen the impact that Ty Robinson's not just had this year, but over his entire career. And why wouldn't you want to be like that guy? So I do feel like you're going to have young players that they're going to make impacts all over the football field. I think Nebraska has basically, has a sales pitch that even if there's a fifth year senior that's sitting there, if you are capable of helping Nebraska win football games, you will find a way onto the playing field. And I feel like those players that would be true freshmen want to hear that it's not like, hey, you're going to come in, you're going to automatically redshirt, and you're probably going to start playing a little bit of a sparingly role by the time you're a sophomore. And then hopefully then you're either starting or in the two deep like as a junior. I don't think anybody in the right mind can go out there and say that to recruit these days. They're never going to get that player to go ahead and commit to that. But what they can do is say that everything is out there and it's all in front of you. All you have to do is go out there and get it. And I think that's all that Matt Rule has really done. I think just in the situation of Van Poppel was, like I said, all hands on deck last year, got him into the situation, got him some playing time, got him some experience. Now you've got a year to kind of build, develop, learn, and get ready to have the next 3 years and become the next Ty Robinson. That doesn't sound like a bad thing.
We're talking with Bryan Munson of Husker Online here on our Aloe Fiber VIP line. Bryan, you mentioned Nebraska wanting to stay on the positive road, ride the wave of momentum. Does it come to a screeching halt with a Friday home game where it's really tough to have visitors in? Or what can the coaching staff do to try to keep that momentum going, as Nebraska hosts its first Big Ten Friday night game?
Yeah, I'm not really anticipating too much this Friday night, unfortunately. It's just, it bumps heads so badly with high school football. I mean, if there's one thing I kind of jokingly have kind of thrown around a little bit. Michael Terry has a football game on Thursday. If there's a possibility of maybe getting him back up for another trip, it could be this. But I mean, at the same time, I think that it just requires your staff and everybody else to kind of accelerate, their week. They changed all the days around when it comes to like, hey, this is where we're going to be, this week, get ready for this game. That means install is this day and this day, and everything just kind of changes up and it becomes kind of a logistical nightmare. And if you kind of clear the noise, I think, and really get focused on your opponent, really get focused on, Friday night being the night and then having a longer week, you can, potentially, do some different things where you're going out maybe on Saturday or Thursday night, maybe traveling around to kind of see some ball games if that's a possibility. But I really think it would be a surprise to me, I think, to see any recruits there on Friday night this week. I just don't think it's going to happen.
A guy that you wrote about that was in town for Nebraska and Northern Iowa, out of the state of Montana, Matt Ludwig. I would recommend people go check out your article on Husker Online. But what can you tell us about the tight end athlete type from Montana who visited against Northern Iowa?
Yeah, I mean, it's this is one of the top recruits for Nebraska in the 2026 class. The Huskers like him as a tight end initially, but Nebraska is also in a really, really good spot with a number of 2026 tight ends, including Isaac Jensen down there at Millard South. You got Ian Premer from Kansas, who's also a 4-star tight end. So I think Nebraska's got a couple of really nice tight ends that are also on the hook. But the thing about Ludwig is that he's just a tremendous athlete. He's 6'4", he's 225. He could play rush, a rush edge. He could be a hand in the dirt guy if he continues to grow. This is his second trip to Nebraska. Getting him there for that first game day environment, he wanted to come in for Colorado, but it wouldn't work out. But I mean, you get him in this week, very positive experience. Obviously, Carter Nelson and Fedoni were really showcased on Saturday night. I think the other side of this is that he's paying attention to both sides of the football. I think he can just flat out just say that I can see playing, anywhere the Nebraska coaches say that they want me to come in and play. I mean, he has such a positive vibe about like what's going on in Lincoln right now. And obviously, he's cousins with the former North Platte Bulldog, and the current Cornhusker Vince Genatone, which really helps out too, I think, as well. I mean, because he's really a family guy. He mentioned it to me like, look, I loved getting there. I loved seeing this. All the things were really cool, but I got a chance to hang out with my family. And I think that's a big part of his decision. So he's got some other big trips, kind of on the horizon for him. And I do feel like he'll get back at least once next year, if not twice, just because of the official visits in the summer. I know like Steve Wiltfong put in a forecast for him this weekend to Nebraska. I feel really good about the idea that he ends up being a Husker. It's just going to be really fun to see how Nebraska puts that 2026 group together, because you do get a player like Ludwig. It takes some pressure off of you in other places to kind of figure out like where this guy can potentially fit in and do what for us. Particularly like if you get an Isaac Jensen or an Ian Premer to kind of help push him maybe over to the defensive side of the football.
Do you like him as an offensive or defensive prospect better for Nebraska?
I tell you what, he is so fun to watch on both sides of the football. I don't think it really matters. It's interesting. I think I actually like him better on defense. I mean, you're asking a defensive guy. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and be honest. I'm a little biased, but I can absolutely understand why Nebraska likes him as a tight end. He's just different. He's just a different dude. He's really thick. So I think that really helps out, like with where you think you can kind of play more of a true tight and get him into some more blocking. But I think just athletically, I could just see that guy being a 6'4", 245-pound dude, coming off the edge that is just flying and competing with his cousin to become the best athlete, obviously on the football field.
Any other recruits that caught your eye, caught your ear over the weekend against Northern Iowa?
I thought what was an interesting update, and I've got a couple other ones to come out. I got Tyron Parker coming. I got Samuel Simpson. I've got actually the quarterback that was in from San Diego, Brady Palmer. I've got some other stuff kind of coming up. Some of that stuff might be in 3 and Out on Wednesday morning. But the one I really felt like was interesting was Rocco Marriott, and he's a quarterback, out of Missouri, who came to camp at Nebraska this summer, and I had to ask him, what does it mean to you? Like when you see a true freshman quarterback out there, is it like a positive or is it a negative? Man, he had some crazy quotes and comments about Dylan Raiola and how he felt like the team, views him as a leader. And he saw that like in the locker room before the game even started. Now the team just, basically responded to everything that Raiola was doing, and how he actually went there and felt like he learned some things just by watching Dylan. It was really fascinating. That was a really fascinating interview, but you can find that up on Husker Online.
Definitely check that out on Husker Online. But what I think you're saying, Bryan, is actually that Rocco Marriott learned a lot from watching Patrick Mahomes, right? Because Dylan Raiola and Patrick Mahomes are the same person, right?
That's what I heard. I've heard that he might be emulating him a little bit, and I guess, they all can't be Josh Allen, so they might as well go ahead and try to be Patrick Mahomes.
Hey, that's the next best thing or something like that. Bryan, as always, appreciate your time, appreciate your insight. Want to make sure people check out your work on Husker Online and on Twitter at Bryan Munson _. Have a great rest of your week, man. We'll catch up after Illinois.
Talk to you next week. See ya.